So I want to, before we start the Gongchik, I want to share with you during break, Kim shared with me that in a recent teaching on the Samadhi empowerment by Drupal Rinchen Dorje, he said that the Guru Vajradhara in the form of Heruka and Varahi, it's sometimes said that there are 4 fingers, away from you, which is right here. I talked about this at the beginning. So he clarified and he said, at least the way he learned it, it's like, it doesn't have to be 4 fingers. It's just like on the level, on this level, that they are on this level. Like, but elsewhere, on at least one occasion, Gongchik Rinpoche says 4 fingers. But my take, or rather my style, of course, you need to figure out, for yourself, is to say you experiment, not experiment out of like wanting to be more clever than other people, but you experiment as in you need to see, how it works best for you at the level that you are. With all the teachings, with all the practices, I often suggest to people, here is what it says, but then you have to own it. You have to practice it, more importantly. So even like when it says on the level of like the guru deity is on the level of your eyebrows, right? It says that. Then you can, you really need to kind of ask further, like, wait, what does that mean? Yeah, all right. What does that mean? Does it mean it is only that big? So that it can fit on the level of your brows? Or does it mean like, it's 3 times your size, or however number of times your size, but the center part of the deity is at your brow level, right? There can be so many questions also. But you start with whatever you can. Yeah. Then as you practice, your practice can help clarify. Then of course you can consult teachers and give them, your experience. And then from there, you will learn more, learning that comes from your experience. So anyway, yes, when you kind of, as I said from the beginning of this class, there's another opportunity. Someone else is teaching this coming Sunday. If you have the chance, be exposed to how the different recommendations. I always say, all these are recommendations. But they are recommendations that are based on the various writings of the past lineage masters. But I want to point out, even past lineage masters have different opinions, one from the other. So there's a funny story about the 13th Dalai Lama. When he was trying to institute some changes to the way things are done in Tibet in his lifetime. 13th Dalai Lama said that he could tell, like a lot of problems are going to come to Tibet very soon. He sort of anticipated depends on who you talk to. Some said he knew, like this disaster is going to come from the communists. So he tried his very best to reform Tibetan military, for example. I mean, he was the king, so no choice, Even as a Buddhist monk, he was responsible for defense and all that. So he tried to reform Tibet. He tried to reform the education system. He tried to get them to, not be so like, as Our Holiness says, frog in a well, hopping around in the well and think, you know, oh, I know the world. But many of his officials and the aristocrats, especially the aristocrats, opposed the Dalai Lama's, the Team Dalai Lama's move. And they would often say, you know, but the great fifth, as in the great fifth Dalai Lama, the first of the Dalai Lamas that also became political leaders. So often they would like try to stop him by saying, but the great fifth, but the great fifth, but the great fifth, you know, decided is this, but the great fifth decided is that. So one day he got fed up, the 13. He was like, hey, who do you think the great fifth was? So he's 13, right? And according to this understanding, it's the same person. So he's like, hey, who do you think the great fifth was? Me. And now I'm saying we do it this way. So even within the same Tuku lineage, you know, opinions change, instructions change, you know. But then we say, you know, the only things, the only instructions that you should not change and think that is changeable is the instruction on cause and effect, how karma works. No, that doesn't change. Kyoba Rinpoche is very adamant about that. That doesn't change. Don't think that those things change. Those things cannot change. That we have to be very clear about, you know. No amount of how the world has changed, you know. No amount of your situation changing, you know, will ever change. Should ever change what the Buddha taught about cause and effect. The general principles of cause and effect, where suffering comes from, where happiness comes from. Gongchik, now we are looking at chapter 6. So somewhere around the sealing, getting trapped and getting sidetracked. So there are 4 traps and 3 4 traps, or 4 getting stuck, and 3 straying. So we looked at that already, and also Sobish's notes. Yeah. So then, if you look at Sobish's notes, I want to call your attention. In Dorje Sherup's explanation on, so Vajra statement 6.8 is saying that the types of emptinesses that arises from studying, reflecting, and practicing contains traps and sidetracks, right? So Dorje Sherup's discussion on how the emptiness that arises from study can have, you know, some potential dangers. So he says this on page 578, if you have the physical book. Dorje Sherup says, having differentiated the perceived external objects into fine particles, people hold them to be like a yak tail and a meadow. And in the footnotes, Sobish says, so this is like saying, if you look at a yak tail, like a tail, and specifically in this yak tail is also turned into like a fly whisk. Especially in India, they trade with the Tibetans for yak tail, because the tail of the yak, that hair, you can harvest that hair and turn it into what's known as the fly whisk, a stick with this tail, and it's to not so much to kill flies, but to, you know, shoo away the flies that come and buzz around your face. So what it means by that is to say, yak tail, right? What we call yak tail is actually just many individual hair. Now, all together collectively, you call it yak tail. But when you look closer, you see that there's no one thing called yak tail. So he's saying, likewise, you know, when you study, through study, you learn, oh, there is no I. This I is just like a yak tail. In fact, it's just many different elements. Collectively, when you stand far enough away, you see, oh, yak tail. But if you really walk very close and zoom in and look at every single detail, you cannot find yak tail. There's just all this individual hair. Same with meadow. Far away, or forest, you say, oh, that's the forest. But when you get actually close, you'll see that forests don't exist as a thing. What you have are these individual trees, individual shrubs, and all of that. He says, so this is how people come up with an understanding of emptiness through study. So after differentiating them into their components, they hold that they are not established. They differentiate the inner perceiving mind into single moments. By differentiating these into the 3 times, past, present, future, you understand, oh, they cannot be established. And in that way, they establish emptiness by reasoning. So the purpose of studying all these emptiness texts is through reason. You're like, oh yeah, there's no I. But here, right, in this understanding, it says, well, that's a concept. And if you meditate that concept, you're just still dealing with conceptual stuff. So here's the difference, I would say, you know, between kind of the Kagyu approach and, say, the Gelugpa approach and Gelugpa approach. Gelugpa approach has more confidence in the possibility of this kind of understanding based on reasoning, eventually leading to direct perception of emptiness. Kagyupa doesn't completely cancel that possibility, but is more suspicious, I guess you could say, of that possibility. Instead, Kagyupa emphasizes that your direct perception of this emptiness will come through purifying negative karma, accumulating merit, and devotion to qualified guru. Yeah. So different style. Which one is more convincing to you? Well, that's to you, up to you. You need to decide yourself. Then secondly, Dorje Sherab explains the general understanding of emptiness arisen from reflection. Here, emptiness is arising as a mental object through analyzing and investigating with reflection. And everything is made empty through the Shunyata mantra, or the mantra of triple purity. So he includes, Dorje Sherab here, the Vajrayana method, Om Swa Bhava Shuddha Sabha Dhamma Swa Bhava Shuddhohang. And since the meaning of the 4 great arguments is absolute truth, the mind is applied to that, and so forth. These procedures establish the emptiness arising from reflection. Finally, the emptiness arising from practice, he characterized as People say that if one does not practice all phenomena as empty, one will not realize emptiness. But if one practices them like that, one realizes emptiness. Having analyzed and investigated object and object possessor according to such instructions as of Lord Atisha's lamp of the path, one makes an emptiness the object of the mind and practices that. This is the emptiness arising from practice. So here, it said that Jiden Sumgun says, no, that's not how you arrive at actually realizing emptiness. So here Sobish continues, Jiten Sumgun rejects this view, maintaining that the emptiness of studying, reflecting, and practicing in the way that Dorje Sherab explains what other people do, contains the traps and sidetracks. The first, to be trapped in the fundamental nature of knowledge objects, is given the most attention in all three commentaries. Rinchen Changchup states that all the words that express the emptiness that is to be established, namely all the words of the scriptures, the treatises composed by the 6 ornaments of the world, the commentaries containing explications of their intentions, and all the instructions and teachings arising from them, they take emptiness as an object of the mind. Thereby, one merely turns emptiness into an object universal of emptiness within the proliferating mind. Now, a lot of technical terms going on here. I will give you my kind of summary, my simple summary in a little bit. Go on first. The commentaries compare this to a mother who with her forefinger points out the moon to the child who has not yet seen the moon. And the child looks at the finger without seeing the moon. This we may assume is due to the child's fixation on the mother, which is like a person who studies emptiness through scriptures and arguments, focusing exclusively on the mental activity of doing so. A second example concerns the fixing of characteristics in a particular way. By fixing the characteristics of the moon as being made of water crystal, I mean, this is how Indians understand what the moon is, and as white and cooling, one makes that the object of the mind. However, that is not the actual moon, but only an object universal arising in the mind. Okay, object universal. That's a complicated technical term in terms of Buddhist logic. And I'm not going to pretend to know that well enough to give you a clear explanation. But here in this context, what it is saying is object universal is like using analogies. Oh, it is like this. It sort of has that quality. It's like saying reality is like a dream. Reality is like a movie, right? So of course, the Buddha taught using examples. But then if you just understand the example and you think, oh, I got it, then you'll be trapped. This is what it's saying. Then you'll be trapped. Then you say, well, how else am I supposed to relate to these examples? Here, again, yes, you take those examples, you understand those examples, then you keep it in what, I used this expression earlier, you keep it in your knowledge base, you keep it in your filing system, then keep it there. Then when you practice, right? You practice, say, watching your breath, you practice, say, mantra, but do all of that, right? With the understanding this is to settle the mind, to cut distractions, yeah, settle the mind, cut distractions, increase merit. Not having distractions is merit. It's the result of merit. It's also the growing of merit. And then look at your own mind. But look at it how? Not through, formulas. Now, even though in the Mahamudra instructions, there seems to be these formula. Does it have color? Does it have shape? But if you go through this, does it have color? Does it have shape? Again, in this kind of very rigid, systematic way, it's not going to lead to. It will give you a object universal, meaning a general concept. Then you will take this general concept and you think this is the meaning, but this is not the meaning. This general concept is just an example. So it's saying, don't dwell on the example. One who is directly perceiving the actual object, the moon itself, is one who possesses the realization of the view of our lineage. Since that is beyond the sphere of the mind, profound and difficult to fathom, if one does not realize it, all emptinesses arising from listening, reflecting, and practicing become downfalls and sidetracks. However, when one realizes it, all emptinesses arising from listening, reflecting, and practicing become outer husks. Outer husks has two senses, One, kind of useless from one perspective, as in the husk of a grain. You cannot eat the husk. But it's not necessarily saying that it's useless. It can also mean here, it protects. So then, he says, if you have a direct understanding, like you have actually seen what the Buddha is pointing to, which is this emptiness or this nature of mind, then the types of emptinesses that are discussed in listening, reflecting, and practicing, when you look at that, you go, I know. And they become useful to enhance what you know. So what this is calling for, in my opinion, is that it's a very delicate balance between, right, learning and understanding the concepts, as well as knowing that these concepts, no matter how well you know the concepts, they are not the reality that they are pointing to. How often, we have gone to teachings, especially when we're just very new to this, we've gone to teachings whereby we become so impressed, or at least some of us become so impressed. When the teacher is talking about, there is the 5 paths and the 10 bhumis. The path of preparation, the path of accumulation, or preparation, the path of joining, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, the path of no more learning. And then it's like, and from this point to this point, it is this path. From this point, it is this point, it is this path. And then you're like taking down notes, It's like, then at the first bhumi, then the first 2 paths are worldly paths, and then the next 3 paths are, pure paths. And it's so impressive, But most of us are trapped now, because we're mistaking what the teacher is saying for the actual reality. That all this talk about, 5 paths, 10 bhumis are pointing to. Then, in practical terms, later we run into more problems, because when you then when the teacher or the Lama says, okay, now we practice, then it's like, right? So you do that. You're like, oh, because you're so devoted, you do that. But then at some other point later, you go, wait, what happened to the paths and the bhumis? Because you naively thought, oh, I'm going to experience the first path, the second path, the third path. Like you're going to someplace. Like it's a description of, first you arrive at this town, and then after that, you travel another, 20 miles, and then there will be an exit. You don't take that first exit, you take the second exit. Yeah. But then after a while, you're like, wait, that's not how it works. Yeah. Then by that point, you have become so involved, you don't, you're maybe too embarrassed, or you don't care, to ask that anymore. Like, wait, how are they related? But even if you don't ask, you are stuck, you are trapped. Yeah, so here the approach is, again, very interesting. Yeah, it says, the main practice should be focused on purifying, removing the obscurations. You're like, through what? Well, through meditating on the mind, through ngondro, through deity practice. You do that. But you do that with the Mahamudra flavor, so to say, with a different understanding. But you don't intellectualize the information that you're learning. On page 582, there's a quote from Jigten Sungen from the Dorshema. The Guru maintained that an emptiness that is analyzed and investigated through the discriminative knowledge of listening and reflecting without bringing devotion to perfection. This phrase, remember, devotion to perfection, is dharmakaya. The highest devotion, in other words. So the Guru maintained that an emptiness that is analyzed and investigated through the discriminative knowledge of listening and reflecting without bringing devotion to perfection is mind-made emptiness. Such a realization that merely covers the mind arises very easily in a person who lacks devotion through hearing the dharmas of experience, the profound scriptures of the victor, the songs of former siddhas, and the words of the four yogas. But without abandoning afflictions and conception, how can you cross the ocean of samsara? That is the key line, abandoning affliction and conception. So you abandon the causes of suffering. That you can practice, that you and I can practice. Even you say, oh, I don't know what the nature of mind is. Well, never mind. Don't worry about. Because you can abandon affliction. If there's anger, pacify anger. See the heaviness of anger, of jealousy, of hopelessness, of lethargy, all of that, see how heavy they are, abandon them. When you work on that, without knowing the freedom from proliferation, how can you abandon the proliferating characteristics? Without realizing the unborn luminosity, how can you cut through the streams of births? Those who possess the wealth of practice for the sake of gain and fame, all those who boast about their realization, will they not die defeated at death? Questions, comments, reaction? Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I understand well.
Mm-hmm.
You said that the proliferation is the opposite of luminosity, proliferation mental.
No. No, that's not what it's saying here.
No.
Yeah, say more to your question. I don't think I understand your question.
Because in other sessions, I have heard that you mentioned that the proliferation mental brings us suffer. Because
Yes, of course. Yes.
the
Yes.
same thinking, no?
Yeah.
And I would like to know if it's the opposite of luminosity, or how
No,
can
it's not. It's not necessarily. These are not directly related, but from the perspective of what is actually going on, luminosity and proliferation are two sides of the same coin. If we don't recognize nature of mind, that luminosity behaves like mental proliferation. Loud and soft. But when you recognize nature of mind, then all the loud and soft is understood as just luminosity. Nothing to do, nothing to be stressed by, nothing to feed, nothing to reject.
We can see that as a mantra, as
yes, as deity, as mantra, as
perfection.
Yes, yeah. See, right now we're so exhausted by mental proliferation, so we do meditation or we do things to control that. But a higher, a more profound level of realization, you don't need to control that. The mental proliferation, because that is luminosity.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so several classes back, I talked about, how Gampopa said, namto choku. And namto is conceptual thoughts. Conceptual thoughts is dharmakaya, he says, which is actually a very shocking statement. Normally it says, even here it says, you have to clear conceptual thoughts first. As long as conceptual thoughts are not cleared away, Jidin Sungwen says, the brightness of the sun and moon you cannot see. So practically we're talking about establishing presence of mind or shamatha, so that your mind doesn't keep getting pulled around. So you say no to distractions. No, no, no. So at the beginning, you have to put effort. No, 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 no. But that's not the end. That's not the goal. The goal is not to keep pushing distractions away. But at the beginning, you have to resolve no, 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 no. Then the mind becomes more and more, right, cooperative. Then it settles, right? And settles with clarity. Then at some point, when you recognize how the so-called distractions is just something naturally occurring, and in fact, it's the luminosity, the awareness, it's the light rays of the nature, then distractions no longer behave like distractions. Then you don't need to say no, 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 no. But right now, you have to say no, 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 no.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll give another example. It's like if you're just starting to learn how to drive, you know, you don't want to drive in Guatemala City or Mexico City. That'll be just terrifying. You go look for an empty parking lot at night, you know. So no, 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 no to the other cars, right? But the point of even learning to drive is not so that you always drive in a place where there are no other cars. Then what's the point? So at the beginning, other cars are problems. No, 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 no. So at the beginning, all this thoughts, distractions, they are a problem. No, no, no. So you need to say no because you want to focus. You want to let your mind. But when the mind begins to settle and become more and more present, body and mind in the same place, then even distractions, you know, then other cars, you're like, no problem. When you don't know how to drive, then other cars is a big problem. When we don't know how to be you know, when we don't know how to be in the world, then the world is a big problem. When we know how to be in the world is not a problem.
It's a beautiful phrase that you say. The world is not our problem.
Yeah.
The world is perfect.
But when we don't know how to be in the world, and then when you give a whole bunch of people who don't know how to be in the world together, and you put them all together to try to fix the world, then, you know, you have politicians, right? And in a smaller scale, we are the politicians that turn up at meeting rooms, at committee meetings, at, you know, all of that, you know. I know when you say too much, you know, the world is just fine, you know. Many people who don't understand this will get very upset, you know. And of course, we got to be skillful how to say this. This is based on the particular context that we are saying. The world is just fine. But it should not be misunderstood as, you know, oh, you know, injustice, you know, is fine. Some people having everything, some people having nothing is fine, you know. We're not saying that that is fine. Does our Dharma practice need to have, you know, inform our politics, the way we vote, the way we consume, all of that? Yes. But be careful not to too early put the two together, because there's a danger of like you turning the Dharma to serve your ideology, your worldly ideology. So personally, I would say keep these two kind of separate, especially in the beginning. Not opposed, just, you know, don't try to link them up too quickly. You might distort the Dharma because Dharma is still new to you. Your political ideology is maybe longer with you, you know. And then you might mistakenly think that they are the same thing, but they're not. I want to introduce 610. 610 follows from 6-9. It says habituating to realization is practice. As in, when practice finally starts, meaning in the Mahamudra context, what are we actually practicing? Practicing formally officially starts when we have realized the nature of mind, as in being introduced to that nature of mind. And in our context of talking about the four empowerments, at least, understanding the meaning of the vase empowerment, meaning then successfully receiving the vase empowerment, and then habituating that. So here it's saying it is not. What is it not? It is not as other people say. What do other people say? They say meditative practice is generating bliss, luminosity, and non-thought in the samadhi of tranquil abiding. So there are systems that teach, that say, you should generate bliss, then luminosity, then an absence of thought. These are three very high-level achievements in the more ordinary way of talking about meditative practice. Here, Jigten Sumgön bypasses all of that in a way, you can say. So Sobish has said that in general, what you can say is that Jigten Sumgön's approach to all of this material is a Mahamudrazation of all levels of Buddhist practice. If you look at strictly Vajrayana material, there are all these techniques that are taught how to increase bliss, increase luminosity, and increase non-thought is kind of silly, but to enhance these experience, these three levels. And they say that is the practice you need to work on. Kyoba Rinpoche says, no, that's not practice. There are some really, the commentary by Chodra for 610 is really good. So you read this carefully, There are things that we can kind of tease out. It's like, for example, the quote from Kyoba Rinpoche, the great Lord Drikungpa said, it is not practice, it is habituation. Meaning, it is not like meditation as you think of it, as acquiring something. But what we're doing is just to habituate. So it is bringing habituation to full maturity. Now, this is the interesting part. Since that habituation depends on oneself, you should continuously set your mind in equipoise. Meaning you should continuously stable, make your mind stable. Equipoise means stable. Because if your mind is not stable, if your mind is not present, how can it habituate, right? To habituate is to make something into a habit. But if the mind is constantly distracted, how can it habituate? Right? So if you feel like, I don't know what to habituate right now, I've not seen this nature. Well, what you can work on now is to stabilize the mind. Let the mind settle. Right? So please go over the commentary for 610 and Sobish's notes for 610. Then on Friday when we meet, I don't want to be talking so much. I want us to kind of discuss. Bring your questions about this, and you have to do some homework. That way also not so sleepy for you. Then we can discuss, 610. I can tell you one of the questions for me, way back, when you're looking at 610, you're like, okay, great, practice is habituation. But then What if you have not realized? Then what? It feels like, oh, bad news, I have not realized. Then, what might happen, it will trigger this kind of like, I need to go find a guru. I need to go find a guru, Then anyone, who is teaching Buddhism, you think, oh, they can show me, Then you're expecting like specifically maybe some of you, like I can show you, That's not how it works. It should not trigger the, I need to go find someone who can show me. No, that's not how it works. Yeah? But we can talk about that. Yeah. So 610, look at the commentary, look at the notes, and then on Friday we'll go over the 610. Then 611, we will not go to 611 after we finish 610. We're going to go back to chapter 1 and pick up from where we left off in chapter 1. Right now, we are going back and forth between the two chapters. And the reason for doing this is because the earliest versions of Gongchik, sometimes chapter 6 is chapter 1. Other times, chapter 1 is chapter 1. So either of them can be the kind of beginning point to look at Gongchik. Hopefully, you're seeing why these two approaches. Chanchu semchu rinpoche ma ge pa nam ge gyurche ge pa nyam pa me pa gone gong du bel war shu. Okay, ta-ta. There is Kagyu Sangha tonight for people who are involved in that. We're looking at 4 dharmas of Gampopa. So see you tonight. If not, see you tomorrow for those who attend the Lojong. If not, see you on Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.